Alright guys, on the way to the Colectivo, on my way to Oaxaca city from Zipolite, on the Pacific coast, back into the inland, to the mountains. Already pretty excited what the landscape there looks like. For the first time traveling completely alone without anyone else who I know in Mexico. So let's see how that goes. Right, so we're here at the central bus station or something alike of Pochutla, and from where the Colectivos go to Oaxaca city, and they just packed my mochila, my backpack, on top of such a vehicle, of such a Colectivo, and I think in about 5 minutos, the journey begins. So I wanted to use this little traveling vlog to share my top tips when it comes to cheap traveling, especially in Mexico. But really I think this applies to a lot of other places and countries as well. I feel that I can confidentially talk about this topic now because, well, I'm traveling in this country for over 1.5 months now. So let's get right into it. The first and maybe most important point is places to stay overnight and stuff like that. One thing you should know is that in any bigger city or village you will find hotels and hostels, and sometimes there are also campgrounds. There is a huge price difference in between hotels and hostels, and a small to almost not existent difference between hostels and campgrounds. And this is really what makes a huge difference. I've seen hotels for about 800 pesos per night per person, which equals about 40 euros, thus a pretty decent hotel actually in Europe, while the cheapest hostel in which I stayed was 50 pesos per night per person, which equals about 2.50 euros, which is incredibly cheap for a bed and a roof over your head, a shower with warm water and a kitchen and stuff like that, and everything basically, if you ask me. By the way, I showed you this place in my recent video. Of course, kitchen, shower and toilet are commonly shared in a hostel. By the way, I haven't seen a campground going that low in price. The cheapest campground I stayed in was 70 pesos per night per person, which was an incredible place as well, and I showed you this one in this video, in the Palenque video. So as you can see, for the price of one night in a hotel, you can spend 16 nights in a hostel, which is a really big difference. Now for those who like a little bit more comfort and cleanliness, there are also hostels for about 200 pesos per night. I stayed in one of these as well, and I have to say they are usually a bit of a step up compared to the super low budget hostels. Anyway, moral of the story, in any place I've been so far, there was either a super cheap hostel or campground to stay in. You just have to search around a bit, so there's really no need to spend a lot of money in hotels. Quick stop in the middle of the mountains, in the middle of the jungle. We are over the clouds here, as you can see. Completely moist air, but relatively cool, I would say 20 degrees or something. Quite convenient after the hot Zipolite. And I think now we keep traveling. My next point is transport. For long distance traveling in Mexico, you should definitely go for the bus system. There are a lot of companies doing that stuff. The most popular one is called ADO, and unless you have a car, this is your only option for on-the-ground traveling anyway, since there are almost no trains in Mexico. One thing that must be added here is that for the very long distances, the prices for inland flights come pretty close to the price for a bus, but usually they are a little bit more expensive, especially if you find the cheapest bus possible. And this is something I haven't really figured out myself completely. So far I only traveled with ADO, but apparently there are also cheaper companies which are a bit harder to find and a bit less comfortable and a bit less reliable. One more thing about ADO is that there are two different classes of buses, the first and the second class, and obviously the first class is a bit more expensive, with the main difference being that there is a functioning toilet on first class buses. And to give you a little bit of a price example, recently I booked a bus ticket from Oaxaca city to Cancun for the price of 1,170 pesos. This is first class, I believe, and accordingly to my roadmap, that's pretty much exactly 1,500 kilometers. So that's what you can expect, roughly 60 euros for 1,500 kilometers, first class. By the way, that's going to be a 24-hour ride, and could I have gone cheaper there? Probably, but I didn't want to put more effort into it, and I wanted to have a reliable connection so that I don't miss my back flight. So much for the long distance. By the way, you have to take care that you don't get sick on these crazy long rides. I've already made a video on that topic as well. Now, once you are in a certain place, may it be a city or a village, you will always have the choice between taxis and so-called colectivos. And in very big cities, you will also have bigger buses. And when you are in Mexico City itself, the super big town, you will also have a metro. If you don't want to spend a lot of money, you have to go with the public transport, obviously. A ride in a colectivo is usually something like 7 pesos, while the corresponding taxi ride can be up to about 80 pesos, which is still not much when you think about it, like 4 euros, but as you can see, it makes a big difference and that stuff quickly adds up. However, taxis can be a pretty good option if you're a big group of people which can share the price. If you really want to, you can fit up to 5 people in such a cab, excluding the driver. The Mexicans are not so strict there with security and stuff, so there you go, sharing the 80 pesos down to 16 pesos each, which can come pretty close to colectivo prices for certain rides. So much for transport. Use buses and colectivos, not taxis. In some places you can also rent a bike, but that's usually more expensive than public transport. One more thing, if you travel by car, the current price for gas in Mexico is somewhere around 18 pesos per liter, which is a little bit less than 1 euro. So you can calculate from there whether or not it's efficient to go by car. If you're a bunch of people, it might be worth it. And the third point I want to make here is food, because yet again this is a chapter with huge differences depending on where you spend your money. My number one tip is, if you are in the bigger town, there is always some kind of local market. Get your stuff from there, especially when it comes to fruits and veggies. Usually you can also get all your good carbs like rice, potatoes, corn tortillas, beans and lentils and all that good stuff from there. I've already talked about the usually amazing prices for high quality fruit in my Raw in Mexico video. I say usually because some fruit sellers will quickly spot that you're a whitey and give you tourist prices. That's why it's always useful to ask about the price beforehand so that they cannot surprise you with extortion. But even if they give you a higher price here and there, it should be said that food in general is quite cheap. Now when it comes to eating out, it's a whole new different world. You've got fancy restaurants where you will pay European prices or even more, and then you've got these tiny little street shops with tacos and tamales where you can get a satisfying meal for 30 pesos, which is about 1.50 euro. So here again, when you want to stay on the cheap side, support the small little local street shops. They usually also have some quite healthy options. You'll find lots of corn, veggies and some sort of salsa. Usually also with meat and cheese, because they like their pollo and queso and all that sort of stuff, but of course you can order that out. So much for food. Get your fruits and veggies from the local markets and support the small local businesses. Welcome to Oaxaca. That was my 3 tips for cheap traveling in Mexico. Now I gotta find my hostel and see you guys in the next video. See, that's what I'm saying. Cheap, healthy foods. Simple, quick, easy.